And that's what we want to do. We want to tell our kids, the next generation, that God's for them and He's with them. There isn't a more important thing that will happen on planet Earth today than that happens. In the early 1950s, you'd find a little white kid up on a bamboo platform with a slingshot in the West African jungle village that he's growing up in as a missionary kid, West Stafford. Along with all the other kids from the village, brothers really, they would sit up there and they would protect the crops from invading guerrillas. How cool is that? In his book, Too Small to Ignore, West Stafford talks about how he grew up in this village and it was awesome. He loved it. He was loved, he was accepted, he was known, he was valued. The kids played a very important role in village life, like protecting crops. He got to travel with his dad from village to village to preach the gospel of Jesus, and that was 3 months of the year. As was customary for the missionary kids at that time, for 9 months of the year, he would go off to boarding school, hours and hours and hours away from his parents, where he suffered under the oppression of an abusive couple that ran the boarding school. He, more than most, know how tender and formative a child is. And I wanted to bring him in because I want to draw, we're talking about parenting today, but I want to draw everybody into this story. Wes's story under that oppression is a lot like the Israelites in Egypt, so we're going to tie that. But I also love what he says in his book, because raising the next generation takes all of us. Listen to this. It begins with the very next child that God brings across your path. Every child you encounter is a divine appointment. With each one, you have the power and opportunity to build that child up or tear that child down. A life can be launched with as little as a single phrase, an uplifting word, or an act of kindness. The spirit of a little child is a lot like wet cement. When a child is young, it takes little effort to make an impression that can last a lifetime. In my office last winter, we were drawing up a strategy about how we could go beyond Wednesday nights and Sunday mornings to impact kids 7 days a week without adding any staff or any programs. And it was simply to commission those of you that are doing children's ministry every day, all week long. First of all, for those of you who work with them like teachers and pediatricians and foster care workers and daycare workers, where your vocation becomes your mission, that you see that as your mission. And then in the home, that grandparents and parents or aunts and uncles or siblings, whoever's the primary person raising a child, that they would see that as their mission and lean into it to raise children that will know, love, and follow Jesus. So a couple of things we want you to know. First of all, nobody needs to parent alone. Nobody has to parent alone. Your church wants to come alongside you and support you in this journey and provide practical resources for you. And also, we believe that every parent wants to be a good parent, and we can help you take that next step. So the game plan for today is we've got a couple of texts that Mike left for us to look at in Exodus. We're going to look at those, and then we're going to talk about some practical ways to raise kids in the faith today. So we're going to look at a couple of intense scenes. The first one's going to be in Exodus chapter 1. At this point, so Israel's living in Egypt. They've grown so numerous that Egypt's afraid of them. So this is what they do in verse 11. So they put slave masters over them to oppress them with forced labor. And they built Pithom and Ramesses as store cities for Pharaoh. But the more they were oppressed, the more they multiplied and spread. So the Egyptians came to dread the Israelites and worked them ruthlessly. They made their lives bitter with hard work in brick and mortar and with all kinds of work in the fields. And in all their hard labor, the Egyptians used them ruthlessly. The king of Egypt said to the Hebrew midwives, "When you help the Hebrew women in childbirth and observe them on the delivery stool, if it's a boy, kill him. But if it's a girl, let her live." The midwives, however, feared God and did not do what the king of Egypt had told them to do. They let the boys live. Then the king of Egypt summoned the midwives and asked them, "Why have you done this? Why have you let the boys live?" The midwives answered Pharaoh, "Hebrew women are not like Egyptian women. They are vigorous and give birth before the midwives arrive." So God was kind to the midwives, and the people increased and became even more numerous. And because the midwives feared God, he gave them families of their own. Then Pharaoh gave this order to all of his people: Every boy that is born you must throw into the Nile, but let every girl live. That's intense. Can you imagine parenting in that? I mean, first of all, you're slaves and you're oppressed. The word ruthlessly is repeated. That's always a tool to emphasize something. This is a terrible situation. They're moaning and groaning. The first two chapters tell us how terrible this climate is in Egypt. And there's parents in there trying to raise kids. That's incredible. Moses' mom goes to desperate measures, but I can't imagine she was the first, right? I mean, I'm sure mothers, when, they didn't have sonograms, so if a baby boy was born, he's as good as stillborn. Surely moms ran and families were torn apart. So much fear, so much sadness. This is intense. But that's why we're looking at it today, because we're parenting in a pretty intense time ourselves. Now, not like this, but 2020 has been a pretty difficult year. Some of you are single parents, maybe parent of maybe you're a decision maker, a leader, and you've had to make hard calls. Maybe you're a family of color, and it's been a difficult time to try to raise kids and explain things. Maybe there's the parents of special needs kids, and you've lost a lot of your resources, and coronavirus has complicated your life beyond what most of us can imagine. Your kids are kind of in school and kind of not in school. All of us are dealing with some kind of a loss. It's been a difficult year in some way or another, but there's really no clarity on for sure when things will get super familiar again. There's another time in Israel's history where at the destruction of Jerusalem, and captured by Jeremiah in the book of Lamentations, it leads up to one of my favorite verses as a parent. In this context, it was literally about children dying of hunger as the city was under siege. But it's a verse for all of us and the children of our world. Pour out your heart like water in the presence of the Lord. Lift up your hands to Him for the lives of your children. In his book, Wes also points out that when a child is born, there's a battle that ensues for the life of that child, and all of heaven rejoices and anticipates, and all of hell hurls its destruction, and there's a battle. And we got to realize the stakes in that. We got to take our place in the battle and pray for the lives of our children, but pray like this. Pour out your heart like water in the presence of the Lord for the lives of your children. A couple weeks ago, Mike said it's not too early to start praying for your family, not too late to start praying for your family. If you don't even have kids, it's still not too early to be praying for your children, because there's going to be a fight. And thank God we're on the winner's side, but there's still going to be a fight. But beyond praying, we play a critical role in our kids' lives, and that leads us to our next text. So if you flip over to chapter 4, verse 24. At a lodging place on the way, the Lord met Moses and was about to kill him. But Zipporah took a flint knife and cut off her son's foreskin and touched Moses' feet with it. "Surely you are a bridegroom of blood to me," she said. So the Lord let him alone. At that time, she said bridegroom of blood, referring to circumcision. I'm pretty sure that's the weirdest story you're going to hear today. I would just like to take a moment to personally thank Mike for assigning that text to me while he's on vacation. Well, let's see what's going on in here. So at this point, Moses has already seen the burning bush. He's already met with the Lord. The Lord's already commissioned him to be the leader to take Israel out of Egypt. And he's gotten miraculous power. So God has plans for Moses. And that's when this encounter happens. So the point of this bizarre story is that Moses wasn't raising his kid in the covenant. When God made his covenant with Abraham, he commanded that all the boys would be circumcised when they're 8 days old. Well, Moses obviously hadn't kept the sign of the covenant with his son. So when God attacked Moses, it was some kind of infliction. We don't know. There's a lot of details left out of this story. It's probably been more weird. But there's a time here where God attacks Moses at this place where they stay for the night. And it evidently isn't fatal at first because Zipporah has time to act. And apparently she knows that the issue is that Gershom hadn't been circumcised. So she acts. She circumcises Gershom. She does it in a way that's familiar to her with touch on. So she circumcised him, appeased God, and saves Moses' life. Just real quick, I want to point out, have you noticed in Moses' life, he owes his life to the women in his life, his mom, his sister, Pharaoh's daughter, his adopted mom, now Zipporah. If you're a guy and you're leaving all that we're talking about today up to the women in your life, I want to encourage you to step into your role as a spiritual leader in the home. God calls us to raise the next generation to know him, to love him, and follow him, and Moses wasn't doing that. The Midianites were a descendant of Abraham, but they had left the faith of their fathers to follow the pagan Canaan gods, and so they circumcised their men at the time of their engagement, and when they were healed, then they would consummate the marriage with their young wives, and that's why Gershom hadn't been circumcised yet, because Moses is raising him as a Midianite, not as a Hebrew. But Moses knew God. I know he grew up a lot in the palace, but he spent a lot of time with his family before he went there while he was being weaned. That was probably a several-year process. And then we read in Hebrews 11 that Moses forsake the Egyptian life for the sake of Christ. He knew God. It wasn't these 40 years that he forgot. He knew God. But he wasn't raising Gershom in the faith. And so it comes to this bizarre story because God is so serious about us telling the next generation about him. We see the same intensity when Jesus is on earth, and he's talking in Matthew chapter 18 to the disciples. It's that scene where they're saying, who's the greatest in the kingdom? And Jesus pulls a little child up and has him stand and says, hey, you adults, you want to be the greatest in the kingdom, be like this child. And he goes on to teach a little bit, and it's nice. It's nice. And whoever welcomes a little child like this in my name welcomes me. That's nice. And then we get real fierce real quick. But if anyone causes one of these little ones who believe in me to sin, it would be better for him to have a large millstone hung around his neck and to be drowned in the depths of the sea. That's not going to make our Eastview Kids t-shirts anytime soon. But man, Jesus is serious about kids. He goes on to teach some more, and then he says, see to it that you do not look down on one of these little ones, for I tell you that their angels in heaven always see the face of my Father in heaven. And then he tells the parable of the lost sheep. At the end of that, listen to what Jesus said. In the same way, your heavenly Father is not willing that any of these little ones should be lost. Any of these little ones. You go on a little bit further into chapter 19, and you see Jesus with that iconic scene where he's with the kids, and people are bringing the kids, and the disciples come in, and they try to stop it. And Jesus is indignant, Mark says. It's not okay for people to get in the way or to be the reason that kids don't get to come and be with Jesus. That's a warning to us. And what were the kids doing there in the first place? Parents were bringing them so that Jesus would touch them, put his hands on them, pray for them, and bless them. Isn't that what we still want? To bring our kids to Jesus for a divine touch? In Ephesians chapter 6, verse 4, we get our mandate as parents to nurture our children in the faith. To nurture our children in the faith. And so what's that look like? Well, that's what we're going to look at for the rest of our time. 1 Thessalonians 2, verse 11 through 12, Paul says, hey, I treated you guys like I was your dad. So let's look at that and see what Paul thinks a dad is acting like. For you know that we dealt with each of you as a father deals with his own children, encouraging, comforting, and urging you to live lives worthy of God, who calls you into his kingdom and glory. That's what Paul expects a father to do. Eugene Peterson in the Message translates it this way. With each of you, we were like a father with his child, holding your hand, whispering encouragement, showing you step by step how to live well before God, who calls us, I had it right in the first place. Showing you step by step how to live well before God, who called us into his own kingdom, into this delightful life. One day I had a young lady standing at the wall, family resource wall on the Normal campus. And I walked up to her, and she just said, I have a 2-year-old, and I have no idea what to do. This single mom needed a plan. And you know what? God has a plan for your family. And your church has a plan for your family. Something that you can use to raise your kids, to nurture them in the faith. This is what it can look like. Now, we're going to spend some time going over our parenting plan that we've created here at Eastview. I want to encourage you, we're going to barely skim each year a little bit to give everybody a nugget. For all of you, whether you're a parent, a grandparent, a neighbor, a teacher, find something in this that you can find useful. But I want to encourage you to go to eastviewresources.com, and all of the booklets are on there, and get one for the kids in your lives and for their ages. Now, these aren't just kind of push buttons, pull levers, and out pops a great kid. That's not how it works, right? But these are guidelines and principles, things that can help you as you're going, what's this look like? Because frankly, some of you didn't grow up with it. Not all of you are as blessed as me, my parents are here, to have grown up with a faith legacy. Some of you don't know what it looks like to lead in your home as a spiritual leader, but thank God today your kids will never have to say that. So we're going to walk through this, and I know that some of you are coming to the faith late. You're not going to be able to go back and catch up from where you're behind on. That's okay. That's not the point. Some of you have kids that developmentally can't follow the plan as it is. That's okay. There's a lot in there that can help you. If you are on campus, you can pick up physical books, hard copies, but otherwise stop by and pick up, get these on eastviewresources.com. Okay, here we go. We're going to fly a bit because I've got a clock that ticks down, and I want to give you an idea. So we'll see how far we get into this. But the first birthday, the first booklet is on, these are it, by the way, is on baby dedication, child dedication. And so what that is a couple of weeks ago we had a service where some of you gathered around in your family rooms with your kids, and you stood here in the audience, or you came forward with your babies, and you promised to God that you were going to raise your kids in the ways of the Lord. We actually internally call it a parent dedication, because it's more about you raising your kids and making promises to dedicate your children to the Lord. But that's not just the service. We also encourage you to go through the normal rhythms of every day to be blessing and giving your child to the Lord, pointing them to Him every day. Bath times, meal times, bed times, snuggle times. There's little prayers and blessings for you to say over your children, constantly pointing them to Him. The second year is the years of blessing. Now, a blessing, we just sang a song called The Blessing. And it was the priestly blessing from Numbers chapter 6. And so now you got that song that you could learn. And when you're blessing your child, you are making eye contact, gentle touch. You're looking at them, and you're speaking words of life over them. Sometimes from the scriptures like this, or Zephaniah 3:17. The Lord your God is with you. He is mighty to save. He will take great delight in you. He will quiet you with His love. He will rejoice over you with singing. And you're speaking that over your child as he goes to bed at night. Awesome. Now, you may not want to start that if you've got a 17-year-old, but you can still bless your child. Wrap them up in a big bear hug and say, I saw you stand up the other day. I saw your courage. You are strong, and I know God's going to use you in this world to do His good work. That is blessing. That is speaking favor over your child, affirming them and calling them to something good. We do something in these booklets where we encourage you to write letters to your children every year. And then over those 18 years, take a snapshot, throw it with the letter, keep them all, and then when they're 18, give them all to them, and they get to leave with this cool legacy of these letters and these pictures. And they've got things in them like things I loved about you this year. Important memories from this past year. Your favorite type of music is, your hobbies are. This is a 16-year-old one. Things that make you laugh. But then also things like this. I am impressed when you. I've been praying about this for you this year. I've been praying about this for me as a parent this year. Something I hope you learned this year is. One of my favorite discussions this past year was, and you're writing words of life into them for them so that they can keep those and see that legacy, and when they raise their kids, they've got a solid foundation. Third birthday, who is God? So your 3-year-old's right smack a dab in the phase of wonder. And what a great year to emphasize them getting to know the Wonder Maker. So in your everyday interactions, so whether you're in a pile of leaves, or you're at the zoo, or you are catching snowflakes on your tongue, that you're talking about the God that made the world. When you're putting on a Band-Aid, you talk about a God that heals. When you're hugging a crying child, you talk about God's with us when we're afraid and when we're scared. We have verses in the booklet that tell you right from God's own mouth who He is, right from the Bible. This is who I am. And to get to teach your kids who God is. The fourth birthday is about family time. Okay, so we don't want to lose the organic kind of style of the 3-year-old. Matter of fact, we hope that continues all the way through. That's a very Deuteronomy 6, along the way, kind of a way to raise your kids. But we also want to start to introduce something that's like it's intentional time just for faith formation, where you sit down together as a family, like Dale at his dinner table. That's this structured family time where you're intentionally pouring into the faith of your kids. Now make it fun. Have a fun snack, blare of music that everybody knows that's time for family time. They come down, they're dancing around. And then you sit down with your Bible. You read the Bible. You talk about what you just read. You say a prayer. And that's good. Now, don't be discouraged if the first few times everybody's in timeout, including Dad. Stick with it. Make it a normal part of your life. Other times you got to take it on the road, dress everybody in black, go buy a bunch of stuff for a family in need. Ding dong ditch, leave it on their porch, go down the street, hide in the bushes, watch them come out, see that cool new gift from the Lord. And then jump in your getaway minivan and talk about Matthew chapter 6, verse 1 through 4, where Jesus tells us to do our giving in secret and not for the praise of men. Stuff like that are memorable ways to pass faith on to your kids. Fifth birthday is about prayer. This year we're working on fostering a relationship, not necessarily just religious behavior. So have a jar at the dinner table full of slips of paper with things that you as a family can pray about. And pull those slips out. Sick people, lost people, missionaries, relatives. Another way to do that is don't send your kids to bed, but put your kids to bed. Take them to bed. And start that rhythm of a nightly wind down at the bedtime prayer. And the last thing they hear is you, praying over your child. Ready? Okay. Sixth birthday. Preparing for a faith decision. Not that we think a lot of 6-year-olds are ready to make a decision for the Lord and get baptized and that kind of thing. But we think those conversations are coming. And we want you to feel prepared to have those conversations as a parent. To uncover and unpack the gospel and what it means to follow Jesus. What grace is like. What sin means and why do we need a Savior. About baptism, we want to give you the stuff you need to be able to have that conversation so you have the joy of raising your kids right up to Jesus. Right now you can go to thestorymaker.com. It is a beautiful animated short film that unpacks the gospel, really creative, beautiful. The music, the narration, the images are beautiful, and then it invites them into a lifelong relationship with God and to be a part of God's big story. And that's fabulous. So thestorymaker.com, there's a resource for you. The seventh birthday is about the Bible. This year we're encouraging you to read the Bible together, and we have lists of verses. We got short verses, we got long verses, depending on how bedtime's going. And you can have your child draw one out, you read it. And again, that's what they're hearing as they finish up their day. And don't be intimidated if you don't know a lot about the Bible. That's okay. You'll be fine. A lot of our teachers and parents learn a lot when they raise kids. The eighth birthday is about worship. Now, this is the weirdest year ever to talk about gathering, but it's important. The Bible says don't give up the habit of getting together with the church. It says don't do that and be in the bad habit of doing that. Going to church is a holy habit. It's a habit. It's a choice. And you as the leader of your home, make that a priority in your home, that this is something we're going to do. We're going to gather around the television for worship, or we're going to come into the church and we're going to gather for worship. We're going to be with our church family because it is a personal faith, but it is not a private faith. And we're meant to do this together in community. And not just coming together for church, but also like when they're doing their science homework and they learn something super cool about an ecosystem, that you teach them to worship God in those settings. And maybe when you're raking the yard and you look at the beautiful leaves and you see the variety and the color and the wisdom of God's design, and then you turn it into a blessing. And by the way, Ethan, I see this in you too. 9th and 10th birthday, we start to focus on how we are not spectators of the game, but that we are in the game and we're game changers. That we have our sleeves rolled up, and our family is about God's good work in this world. That's just who we are. In the 9th year, we talk about focusing on serving. We got some great stuff in there, but the gist is you get to tell your child that they were made on purpose and for a purpose. And in the 10th year, we get to talk about how God is a generous God and that He's a giving God. And so our family, that's why we're a giving family. And so the next time you shop for Imagine or the food pantry, take your child with them. Let them be a part of them. Let them pay for a few things. Invite them to be, during these 2 years, you're inviting them to be a part of something bigger than themselves. The 11th birthday is about preparing for adolescence. So as your child gets ready to head into adolescence, everything is change. But you can be steady for them. You can be something they can always count on. So their decisions making is going to change. Their school setup is going to change. Their rhythms are going to change. Their relationships are going to change. Their relationship with you is going to change. Their body is changing. Chuck Norris might have given his parents the talk, but the rest of us are on the hook for that. So we've got resources to help you to be able to do that and do that well. Be comfortable. Probably not. Okay, and even if you feel like your relevance is about to slip as you get into this adolescent season in their lives, don't let it. Be the parent you want to be. Be the parent you want to be and that they need you to be. So stay present. The most influential person in an adolescent's life is their parents. And study after study after study indicates that. And that is by surveying them. So hang in there. One guy you need to know is Mark Gregston. Google him, bookmark his page. He covers a wide range of topics in regards to adolescents and raising teenagers. Get that in there. He's great. There are a lot of other resources, but today if I could give you one, especially if you've got one that's struggling, he's fantastic. Give your kids one-on-one time from now on. Make sure that you are dating your child. That could be a half price, slushie at happy hour at Sonic. Doesn't have to be expensive. Could be dinner. Could be fishing. And then pray that God would bless your conversation, that you will build meaningful relationships in a different level as you head into adolescence. The other thing, too, is you heard Dale talk about being a high school leader. As your child gets into adolescence, make sure that they have a second voice in their life. Another loving, caring Christian adult that's speaking into their lives. Get them into an Eastview student small group during this season. It'll be important. The 12th birthday is affirmation. So here comes all that change that we've been talking about. There's going to be a lot going on. But the last thing they need for us to do is to freak out. So you need to be a steady voice in their life. With all the voices, all the opinions, everything going on, everybody wants to put them down. You get to be there. You can be the one they can count on, that you're steady and you believe in them and you love them and you're in their corner. You probably don't have to worry about a lot of 12-year-olds getting a false sense of confidence. Most kids at that age are dealing with a lot of insecurities. They may hide it with some annoying behavior or conforming to some of their friends' behavior, but they need you to be that constant voice in their life. And so there's a lot of ways that you can speak affirmation over their lives. Encourage them and talk about how great they are around other people. Share how they're better than you when you were their age. Take time to truly admire them, especially if you've got one that's struggling. Because if you sit there and look for the great, it will be there. And then you can save that for the moment that's just right, and you can call them onto better things and name them onto better things. Celebrate their efforts and choices and character. So before they make or get cut from the team, you celebrate how hard they worked on their jump shot, how hard they studied for the test before they found out what their grade was. Talk about, it's fine to tell them they're pretty and they're strong and those things, but talk about the things that are substantive that won't change over time. 13th birthday, purity. Don't flake out here. They need us. I would not want to be a kid today trying to navigate purity in this world. I was a kid at least 10 years ago, and it was hard then. I really wouldn't want to be doing it now. You know, Ben talked last week. He's got young adults coming in and saying, I don't have any idea what a godly dating relationship looks like. Well, you get the opportunity to clarify the standard, to show them this is how a young person lives a pure life. And don't focus just on sex, but focus on purity. It is entirely possible to be technically a virgin and have lost your purity. So focus more on life stuff like media and jokes and conversations, thoughts and fashion. And give them a positive vision of what healthy marital intimacy looks like. Don't weird them out, you will. But here's what Home Point says. Nothing gives a child a positive view of God's design for passion like basking in the love of parents who cherish one another and speak positively about the joys of marital intimacy. There's your lunch topic for today. They need you to help them walk through that. That's tough. 14th birthday is about personal growth. So just briefly, we've been talking about doing a lot of stuff together as a family. At this point, we want to encourage you to be coaching them to develop these holy habits of their own. So that's the focus of the 14th year. And if you're an early riser, I just want to let you know, would they go, I don't think I've ever seen my dad read the Bible. Well, it's probably because they get up at 11. And you've already had your quiet time. So make sure you talk about it so that they know and they have that example in their life. The 15th birthday is about communication. And what we want to do is we want to focus on building and maintaining and rebuilding a healthy relationship in regards to communication. Josh McDowell coined the phrase, rules without relationship equals rebellion. And so we want you to lean into the relational side of your parenting. So we've got conversation starters. We've got things to say when the conversation, barely gets started or stalls out. But these kids need to have you need to be a safe place for them to process. So stop lecturing long enough to listen and let them process. And don't freak out, at least on the outside. And let them think through things and have you to process it and point them in the way that Jesus would have them live their lives. You also need to really know our kids. Listen to this. In Just a Facebook, it says, kids don't learn from people who don't like them, and they will never feel like you like them if you don't know them. So get to know the kids in your lives. 16th birthday is about freedom and responsibilities. Kids are going to gain their freedom one way or another. They're going to either take their independence or you can give it to them in a healthy way over these next few years. That you're teaching them and inviting them to become an adult. You're inviting them into adulthood this year. Now, they are excited about their newfound freedoms a lot of times, but check this out from the booklet. Most teens love the idea of freedom, but often experience stress and fear when they adjust to newfound freedoms. Be there to help them, encourage them, and remind them to rely upon God and the challenges they face. You've been like a parent teaching a child to ride a bike. Eventually, you have to let go of the bike and let them try some things on their own. If they fail, and they probably will, teach and discipline and encourage and be patient. Let me try that one more time. This is 2 Timothy 4:2. Teach and discipline and encourage encourage with patience and careful instruction. And always keep an atmosphere of grace. The 17th year is about finances. A lot of kids going into college felt like they were raised well, but weren't prepared to deal with finances. So we've got a booklet right now that's on finances that will help you to teach the kids to give to God first, to save, to avoid debt, to give to the poor, to be content. But we also want to take some opportunity before they go to college to look at worldview stuff. So we've been partnering with Dr. Richard Knott from Lincoln Christian University and our student ministry teams to develop a set time in their life where we get to talk through theology and worldviews and give them a chance to process and ask hard questions before they go to university and their faith comes under attack. So go right now to the App Store and get the Room for Doubt app. It's a fabulous resource for parents and for teenagers. It's a Q&A type kind of format. Great questions about theology and other religions. I highly recommend it. Okay, so the 18th birthday. Here we go. We're going to launch them. So this year we're spending getting them ready to be out on their own, or at least be into that 18th year of life. Even if they still live at home, there's new challenges. We got stuff like checklists. and sending off moments. But the thing I want to focus on is just this idea of healing wounds. Take this year to heal wounds. Don't let them walk out the door with it. John Eldridge, in his book Wild at Heart, talks about how every father wounds his son and that affects them in adulthood. Well, don't let them walk out the door with that. Take time. Have the conversation. Ask them, how have I wounded you? I've done it. It's a lot of fun. Not really. But it's important. It's important to do. Don't let them carry it off. Well, you've noticed this over here. This is a jar of 3,000 gumballs. This represents the average kids, how many hours the average parent has to influence their child in a year. 3,000 hours. This represents 40 hours that the average kid will spend in church. Now, this jar represents how we're trying to make a lot of those hours significant and monumental. Not every hour is the same. Your jar would be the same. But what this illustrates is we can't leave this to church. This takes all of us. Maybe you're your parent, your jar's got a lot of significant hours in there. Maybe you're a coach. Maybe you're a teacher. Maybe every time you have a chance to lift a child up, you do that. Remember Matthew 18:14? That's the verse where God said, where Jesus said, "And your Father in heaven is unwilling that any of these little ones be lost." I know the stats. I know the stats in America say that young people are walking away from the church, but you know, those studies include a lot of churches that withdrew from the battle. They haven't made it a priority to raise the next generation to know, love, and follow Jesus. It includes a lot of homes that haven't made that a priority, that have shirked their responsibilities, hoping somebody at church will take care of that. We are going to pray, and we are going to parent, and we're going to prepare our ministries, and we're going to influence kids with positive things in their lives, pointing them to Jesus, as though we believe that God is not okay with us losing even one. Let's go.